very good to see you all this morning, up so early. I'm going to talk today about passion and balance, both in work and in life. I'm going to start talking a little bit about passion and how we have passions and what they are, and then talk balance, and then talk a little bit about a conflict between the two and some of the things that I have seen in my own life and others. When I say the word passion, you may think of all sorts of different sorts of folks that throw themselves totally into it. Some people have, like athletes, they have a passion for their sport, or entrepreneurs that are out there driving, maybe missionaries that go someplace. Some individuals will use the word passion around, I have a passion for wine or women or beer and men or other aspects of passion that people have. Others folks, it's a matter of passion in areas like passion for power. And one of the things that I found when I've thought about my own passions and look at passion is that they are so important to living life to the fullness. I have a 25-year-old son. To give you an example of a passion, when he was in school back east, he got involved in some outdoor winter activities because he didn't like the skiing back there as much as he did out here. And from that he got into ice climbing, and from the outdoor ice climbing he decided to start climbing mountains, and he found that he just had an incredible passion for climbing mountains. Well, he's now climbed, much to my chagrin, the tallest mountain on 5 continents, and he's going to try to climb Everest this spring. That's something that comes from him, that he's just driven by it, and it's almost like he has to do it. I was talking to him, I says, why do you like it so much? He says, there's no feeling like being out there. He says, a lot of other folks like to stay in the tent. I like to get out in the mountain, the quietness, the stillness, and just being out there. That's an element of passion. And when we find that in our lives, it's extraordinary. My own personal passions follow a little different line. I am not a mountain climber at all. He took me up once up Mount Hood in November. That's not the time to climb Mount Hood, by the way. Being up there all alone, we were the only ones going up the mountain that day. When we came down, we ran into a couple of others. Being alone on the top of Mount Hood, and it happened to be a clear day, and being able to see all the way to Rainier and down to the Sisters with your son is kind of a unique experience. So that part was wonderful. The climbing part, not so wonderful. Some of the passions I have are around building teams to achieve extraordinary results. I just love getting to be a leader or a coach or a mentor around things and seeing them achieve things that they wouldn't otherwise do. Clearly that's one of my jobs in what I do in my work, is assembling people to achieve those sorts of results. The other area that I had this is I've coached a lot of sports teams. And while I loved coaching teams and I love seeing the kids win, what I really hoped I was doing was really building them some skills of interacting with each other for life. And I took great joy in it. As a coach, I had teams that lost every game and teams that won every game. So I realized it wasn't all about won every game of the season, lost every game of the season. It wasn't really about me, but what could I do in those sort of environments? Now I want to take a moment right now, before I get on the rest of my talk. I'm going to pause. Now I want you to maybe close your eyes. Now I recognize it's early in the morning, so please don't fall back asleep when you do this. And I want you to daydream just for a minute or two about what your passion is. Thank you. It felt good, didn't it? When we get connected to our passions, we get connected to some of the deepest feelings in our life, and just a joy comes on us. Sometimes even a little scary, what some of those passions, when you kind of let them go when you realize that. And that's the good part of passion. Now I'm going to get a little bit later to some of the problems involved in passion, but before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about balance. Most people, when they talk about balance, they talk about work and life, or work and home, and the need to balance those two. That's not the topic I'm going to talk about. Pat Gelsinger spoke to this group recently. He's got a book out, an Intel employee, Balancing Your Family, Faith, and Work. And I encourage you to read that if you're looking for it. What I want to talk about is balance across 4 dimensions. And these have been 4 dimensions that I've looked at in my own life, As I raised my boys, I looked at it in their lives, and I always kind of get a check off of how are they doing across these 4 dimensions. The first dimension is your intellect, or your mind. It has to do with our thought patterns, many times our work. Sometimes it can involve the things that we love to read about or study, and getting that active mind and making sure that we have it and we're growing with knowledge. The second spot is your heart. Now, your heart, obviously I'm not talking about your physical heart, but that part of our heart that deals with our emotions and our relations, family, friends, the sort of people that we deal with every day, and how they're touching our heart. The third is the body, and trying to keep our bodies healthy. We all know about diet and sleep and exercise and all the things that we can have. But there's been something I've found interesting, that when people lose their health, when their bodies don't quite work the way they should, it seems like that's all they can focus on. And many of you that have had some of those things, it probably just becomes pervasive, whether it's just a sprained ankle or perhaps something much deeper wrong with you. And the fourth area is spiritual, the soul, the relationship you have with God. For some, maybe it's meditation. For others, maybe it's going out in nature. For me, it's a personal relationship with God. But as you think across those 4 areas, the intellect or the mind, emotions or the heart, the health or your body, or the spirit, you might think about how are those aspects balanced. When I was raising my boys, I always look and said, well, how are they doing in each of those 4 areas? How are they doing in school? How are they doing in various sports activities or other things like that? How are they doing in terms of friendships? How are they relating to the family? And then how are they doing in terms of their spiritual quests? Those 4 areas are interesting. When I talked to a friend, I told him I was going to be giving this talk, and he says, I read an article on that. And it was actually in the Harvard Business Review. Some of you that might be interested in it, it was not written the way I'm talking about in terms of trying to get balance into your lives, but it was rather an article written by Jim Lohr and Tony Schwartz called The Making of a Corporate Athlete. It's back in 1991. Some of you might want to grab that article, because it actually had those same 4 categories that I was going to talk about in this article. So I guess they got to be somewhat right, if it shows up in Harvard Business Review. One of the interesting things about each of those balanced areas is we can ignore them in the short term. We can all ignore our minds, we can veg out, we can sit down in front of the TV for any number of hours, although there's some obviously educational stuff on there. Very little, but some. We can ignore our relationships, and oftentimes we do. Sometimes we get so involved in things that we can ignore relationships, and people forgive us for a certain period of time. We can obviously ignore our bodies. Many of us do that on a regular basis. And we can ignore our spirits, our souls. But over time, if you continue to ignore any of those 4 balance areas, it's going to come back and cause you problems. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. Oftentimes when people think about balance, they put balance up there as the holy grail of life. If you can lead a balanced life, you're going to have the best possible life. But when I think about it, when I think of someone that's totally balanced, totally disciplined, they get up at, maybe someone here got up at 4:30 and exercised for an hour already this morning, and they didn't want to eat some of the food here because they have a special diet that they prepared, and they meditated or read a Bible before they came here, and then they're going to have this for the intellect. I mean, they've got all 4 categories done before 7 o'clock in the morning. When I think of a life like that, I kind of go, boring. I mean, is that what life's about, is only to achieve balance? So while balance is important, I'm going to talk a little bit more how I see it's important, I think folks who only want to pursue balance are not going to find the zest in life. Now, on the passion side, we clearly can find the zest in life. We all felt it a little bit earlier when I had you pause for a minute. But passion has some real negatives. And I suspect any of us that have pursued something passionately, we've seen some of those negatives. Certainly when you think about passion and work, we have a word for it. A workaholic is someone who has undue passion for their work. It can oftentimes lead to isolation, ignoring relationships. But it can also lead to some other things. I know that we probably see some of the negative elements of folks who are sports stars or folks who are politicians because they're in the news more. But it's always amazing to me how so many of these folks tend to have a serious problem, and a serious problem with balance. It can lead to addictions. It can lead to other ways in which they're trying to, pursue that passion, but they just can't handle their lives elsewhere. As I was thinking about this, I thought, who could kind of epitomize that? And I thought of Mike Tyson, and I was going to say, he did everything right in the ring, but he bit a guy's ear off in the ring, so maybe that isn't even a good example. But a guy who totally destroyed his life. We read every day about politicians who are so caught up in their power and almost their invincibility that they have either corruption or moral failures because they didn't support their lives in some way with some balance. We see entrepreneurs, or business people that raise to the top, but when you actually sit and talk to them, their life's shattered. Some of them have health problems. Some of them have, relationship problems, maybe on their third or fourth or fifth marriage. These are not folks who are necessarily successful. They have sure success in one area around their passion, but is that a life that we choose? So when you just pursue only your passion, it seems like you have the possibility of ending up with, really a limited life in some way. In fact, I would say that, balance without passion is a life unfulfilled. But passion without balance is a life that's heading for disaster. And so we need both, but they're clearly at a conflict. Because those things that bring us passion, that just drive us to go more and more and more and more, are the enemy of balance. They take the time, they take the energy, they take the things we need to do to put our energy in to stay balanced and to stay in having these four categories, creating the foundation for us to have a really truly balanced but also passionate life. So what I would suggest this morning, that the end point is to gain the passion and have the ability to pursue those things that we were dreaming about earlier, but creating a foundation across those four balance areas. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more and have a little exercise for each of you in just a minute. But before I get that, just think for a moment about that, what our lives would be like if in our mind, if we didn't pursue knowledge and wisdom, we might not have the skills to be able to deal with our work or our life. And I would encourage you to invest in your minds. If we don't pursue relationships in a number of areas, then we're not going to have the ability, when we have those terrible days around our passions, to either go home or sit down with friends and have them encourage us, have them support us. And if you don't invest in those, they're not going to be there when you need them. If we don't take care of our bodies in the fashion that we all know, there's so many, if we're over to Borders where we were before, all the self-help books around taking care of your body, eventually it will break down. It will break down if we don't care for it. Now, short term it can break down too if we don't feed it and sleep it and do those sort of things. But if we don't go through those processes, it's going to break down. And at those moments when we need our maximum energy to pursue the passion, certainly if it's something like climbing mountains, you need to do that. But even in work, where you think it's mainly with your mind, there's all sorts of studies that show the value of having the strong energy to be able to carry through in a day. And finally, if we don't feed our spirit, we're going to be out of touch with our Creator. And if we're out of touch with the Creator, maybe we're going to be out of touch with what He created us for, which might be the best passion of all in our lives. Let me hand out a page here. It's going to take a little while to get around. I hope you have, I think there's some pins on the table, so I'm just going to hand these out. There should be enough. Each person grab one of these, please, while and I'm going to get to that in just a moment. What this page is I'm handing out, you can see it's got a lot of blank space on it. And that's for you to kind of fill some things in today. And I wanted to walk through first the passion, and then walk through these areas of balance and tell you a little bit about some things I do in my life. And I'm certainly not a model of perfection in this area. But it has been something I have thought about for a number of years, and I've tried to lead my life a little bit along these lines. So first, when I asked you at the beginning of the talk to pause and daydream, some sort of passion came to your mind. Now, some of you, it might have been, that's my problem. I'm not passionate about anything. And so you may not be able to write down something there. That may be something you want to reflect on over the course of the day and the week. What really drives me? Because again, if we can get attached to our passion, if we can understand what it is and if we can pursue it, that is where we're going to find the most fulfillment in life. And if we're not attached to that, then I think that is a life that's not fully lived. So just jot down a little something there in terms of the passion. Again, I talked about a couple of mine earlier about building teams. I want to talk about another one of them now. And it's a strange one. And I do this to show you that passions can kind of be anything. I'm actually passionate about economic development. Now, most of you would say, boring, all right? I was an economics student as an undergraduate. And I just love learning about economic development. I'm involved locally on some of those areas. And one thing that's really caught my heart is I've gone overseas and got involved with micro enterprise programs. These are programs where very small loans are given to folks typically in third world countries. By small loans, I'm talking on average under a couple $100s. The amount we might spend on a very, very nice evening at this restaurant with a group of our family or something. That is changing their lives, where they're able to do that. They're people that can't qualify for credit, and it changes their lives. And I've gotten involved and visited a lot of these programs, and it's something that just whenever I'm out there, whenever I'm doing that, it hits my soul, it hits my spirit. I just feel like this is a spot I should be at that particular moment. So your passion could be something like I say, like golf. You know, that may be what it is. And the question is whether God gave you the gifts to actually play the game is another issue, but you might still have a passion for it, right? Or a passion like that. So it's all an individual passion. Now, once you've done that, I want you to go down into the next portion of the chart, and I want two things on each area of these balance. One is, how am I doing? And I'm going to put you all back in school today. On each of them, just give yourself a letter grade, A to F. You all know how to, you've all been graded before, so you know how to do that. And then, what changes do you think you might want to make in each of these areas? And as we're going through them, I'm just going to kind of talk a little bit about some ideas or things you can have. First, all of you that are here this morning are probably here for one of two reasons. One is you wanted to hear the talk, or two, you wanted to be with someone at 6:30 in the morning. And someone invited you here. So it's either a relationship is why you're here, or it's the talk that's here. So I'm going to assume that you're all here to listen to the talk so for the first term. We'll get to the relationship on number two. But in terms of the intellectual and the mind, what are you doing to keep learning? What are you doing to keep your mind going? It might be reading, might be listening to speakers. Maybe some of you are going back to school. Clearly in our work, we're constantly learning. We're constantly able to do things that expand our knowledge. Oftentimes you hear of young women who are totally engaged in the workplace, have a child, and choose to stay home. And one of the things that they'll often say is, I've got to get some adult conversation. I've got to get my mind working. Well, that's an example of where someone who needs that mind. We need to keep our minds active. We need to keep growing, no matter what age it is. There's all sorts of research in terms of Alzheimer's and other things at the later stages of life, that if we keep our minds active, if we keep growing, if we keep learning, we're going to be able to stave off some of those issues of dementia later in life. So it's absolutely critical. So how are you investing in your mind? And if you're not doing it the way you want to do it, what do you want to change about it? Jot it down right now. The second area is the emotional, or the heart. This is the area of relationship. You know, we're 3 days away from Valentine's Day. It is one of the very best or very worst days of the year when it comes to love. Those that have it are able to celebrate it, and those that don't really see maybe a void in their life, saying, hey, no one brought me any Valentines. It is so central to our being to both be loved and to love. Now, I do this not only in my family environment with my wife, but a part of a men's group. Now, the word love and men's groups don't really go together. But I got to tell you truly, I love these guys and I know they love me. I've traveled with folks where you really get to know them well. And there's just something close, whether it is a man or a woman, of a friendship. Some of the things I do at work are really relational. I've had the opportunity to invest my life into folks. Some other folks have invested their lives in me as a mentor. And the process of mentoring and coaching is highly relational. And oftentimes it extends beyond just the work. Recently, I had an employee that was having a little problems at work, and I've said, I think we need to do a little review. You're not interacting as well as you can. I says, but if we take down this path, I want to caution you on something. He did not listen quite as well as he should. And I said, when you go through and build these skills, it's not going to just affect you at work. It's going to affect your entire life. And he says, I really don't listen so well. And I said, well, why don't you check it out with others? So he went home and asked his wife, and you know what she said. So we entered into the program to help improve his listening skills. But coaching and developing relationships like that, it really goes beyond life. He's developing two skills, one, an intellect and mind, how to better listen, and also relationship and heart. So what do you need? How are you doing on your heart? And what do you need to do? Third area, the body. This is probably the one I need to speak about the least. I am a person who exercises regularly. I did not exercise this morning before I came here. I'm not that chronic with it, but I do exercise 3 to 5 times a week. I try to watch what I eat, but I did eat a scone this morning, and they were very good, weren't they? those were very good scones. So, but one of the things I'm best at, by the way, is sleeping. I sleep well. Tim Techman's been with me actually on one of those trips overseas, and I sleep both at night, and if anything gets a little boring during the day, I sleep there too. So that's something. But we've got to get all those aspects of our life done. All sorts of research about sleep deprivation in our society, and obviously all the things about our overweightness of our society and the quality of our diets. And our health, getting an annual physical, all those things. So how are you doing in that area? And if you're not doing something you should be doing, write it down. Finally, the spiritual. This has probably been the area of the greatest growth in my life. I'm 52 years old, and I'd have to say over the last 2 years, which I'm going to talk about in just a second for a little bit, I've had enormous growth. The spiritual is our relationship with God. For me, that is a relationship with Jesus Christ. And I've been a follower of Jesus Christ since I was in my teens. Probably even earlier. I'm not one of those that had a conversion experience. It just kind of came. And it is absolutely central to all I do. To have that relationship, though, is one thing, but there's also a bunch of disciplines that go with nurturing it. For me, it's time in prayer. It's time in the Bible. It's worshiping at a church. It's other studies, other books that I'm able to do to help develop that. But after probably 40 years of following Christ, a couple years ago I read a book about the Holy Spirit and releasing the Holy Spirit. And so even at my age I learned something, and by really releasing God's Holy Spirit in my life, it's transformed many parts of my life as well. So I'm still on this journey with all of you. So, how you doing spiritually? Do you know God? Do you have a relationship with Him? And if not, what are you doing about it? And if you have a relationship, are you investing there? Because for at least with God, those other aspects that I've talked about, I don't know what goes beyond this life. Our bodies don't. We know that pretty much. I'm thinking maybe some of our relationships do, and hopefully some of our mind and our memory does. But our relationship with God definitely does. And that's one thing, if we don't invest well here, if we so pursue our passions that we don't get investments here, we may really be missing something. Not for 70, 80, 90 years, but for eternity. So, in that area, put down a score and see how, and see some things you might want to change to do there. Well, I hope this exercise has helped you, because I want to leave you with the thought I said earlier. Balance, total focus on balance, these last 4 categories where you're just nailing every single one of them without passion, is a life both unlived and unfulfilled. But if you have passion and you haven't worked through the balance, the foundation of being able to get all these aspects of life, it's probably a life that's going to flame out and it's going to have problems, that's going to create disaster. And I think that while these two conflict with each other, because it all deals with the time we have to spend in each day, we got to focus on both areas, passion and balance. Thank you very much for your attention this morning. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I think we have a few minutes for a brief question and answer if anyone's interested. So I'll open it up to that right now, and then I'll just kind of give you a sign when we're ready to move on. So please go ahead.
Yes? What is the name of the book you read?
The book I read, it was Releasing Your... it's Releasing Your... Send me an email, jgrubb@ustrust.com. Releasing Your New Nature, but I don't remember the author. Releasing Your New Nature. But please send me an email if you can't find it. ustrust.com. Yes.
We can put the name of the book and the author up on the website.
Wonderful.
Okay.
I will get the. Now I'm headed off today to another talk, actually in Olympia tonight, and so it might not be able to get it to you till this weekend when I get home, but we'll get it to you.
I just wanted to comment, you mentioned the Harvard Business Review. They actually have a book out called The Power of Full Engagement, where they go deep in each of these.
Each of those things. Great. That's another book we might want to put up, Power of Full Engagement. Yes, there's a little light up here, so if I can't see you in the back, just stand up and wave.
My experience has been, and I think this is sort of a truth of life, that in the early years of your career, in order to get to the level that you're at, there's sort of an inherent demand on you to really to get out of balance, and then that can impact your life longer term if you get so out of balance that other parts of your life become a mess. Have you learned some life lessons about that, or have some wisdom to offer in that area, especially for people here in their first 5 to 10 years of their career, which is really that time when you kind of put a lot in there so that later you can move up to a higher level normally?
Great question. 2 or 3 things. One, I don't believe the idea of, I'm going to do this now and then I'm going to change, okay? I'm going to ignore my family until I'm 35. I'm going to get a great career, and then I'm going to pay attention to them. I'm going to beat up my body until I'm 40, but boy, at 40, I'm going to turn around and do something different. So the concept, and it's very easy to do, because the demands, balance never calls to you. Your family forgives you, your friends forgive you, your body forgives you, your spirit even forgives you, and your intellect to some extent. If you don't invest, it's fine. You can just pursue and work and drive, and there's always a demand there. There's always the other project to do, or the promotion to get, or the things to do. So if you don't, in your 20s and 30s, develop at least some element of this balance, you're probably going to create a pattern of habits that's going to carry on into your later life. So one thing I would do is, if you're in that and you're focused, make sure that you're doing a little bit of the balance while you're doing it, because people don't change. They can change, but it's very, very hard to change in your 40s and 50s. That if you've created a pattern of working with no exercise, here's someone that's in his 50s that is shaking his head. He's nodding with me. 60s. So I would start those elements early. The other thing I would say is, early in your career, it is very easy not to be investing back in yourself. It's easy to say, gee, I'm going to do the project. I'm not going to spend any time reading a book. I'm not going to take any vacation and recharge my spirit. I'm just going to drive. I have found that leads to burnout and burnout leads to lack of success. And the other thing I would say early is don't look at others. It is very easy to look at someone else living a lifestyle that's soaring up, and you're saying, I should be them. Why am I not? Why is what's happening to them not happening to me? And I would say live your own life. Back when I was probably 35, I saw a picture of a friend from business school on the cover of Fortune. And I thought, wow, a friend of mine that's on the cover of Fortune, that's pretty good. And this gentleman had left, I think it was McKinsey & Company, and got a winery. And he said something that kind of stuck with me. And he said, life is not for practice. It's for real. You only do it once. And so if I was, the things I've learned young, and that had a huge impact on me, and it directed me back to some of these issues of balance and family and some of that, to say, hey, I only got one chance at living today or tomorrow. And if I put all that into just pushing my career up, I may be missing something else out. Is that helpful? Yes.
I would like to know about your growing up years. Did you have a family that nurtured this philosophy that you have, or is this something you've developed on your own?
My parents never talked about these 4 areas of balance, but they practiced them. Actually, I just was with my parents, not last night, the night before. I was down in Palm Springs for an evening, was able to cut out of the business thing, go over and spend a couple hours with them. I say I grew up in what I would say is a silver spoon existence. I had 2 parents that had 3 children that we were their total focus. And my dad had a career, even left us when I was a kid for 3 months because they had to open up a French subsidiary. That was before email and telephones. We actually communicated by mailing cassette tapes back and forth. A little different environment than today when we're in constant communication anywhere in the world. And they encouraged us as I think kind of the traditional view of doing these things. But family was incredibly important, and relationships. Even my sister, who I fought with from the age of 2, or she was 2 years younger than me, so the age of 4 probably until 20. They were constantly trying to do it. And I had 2 great models. My mother's motto was, I'm a lover, not a fighter. And so she brought that peace, the warmth, the care, the nurturing into my life. And my dad was someone who I've modeled a lot after in terms of business. My father was one that whether you were in the boardroom or on the shop floor, you related to him. And I learned something with him very clearly is people love themselves generally. And if you want to get a good relationship with someone, ask them about themselves. And they'll think you're great. They don't know anything about you, but just that process. And so all of that sort of a thing that I watched growing up, these weren't emphasized. We went to church, and my dad was out there at the ball fields and all those things. Was something that I had a great upbringing. Focusing on these 4 areas was something I kind of developed as I was raising kids and looking at my own life and reading some of the things that we've mentioned today.
On your first question on the what is your core passion, for those of us, or even like myself, that maybe have not that one core, but a few, is it necessary to have a core passion, or can you still go after the balance or the drive and still several?
Yeah, great question. Do you have to have just one core passion? The answer I'd say is no. I will say something though, that the folks who are most acclaimed in our society generally pick one passion and it is their total focus. You think about an athlete. Most athletes could play a number of sports. The ones that get very, very good play only one and they focus 100% on it. I don't necessarily say that's the thing that should be our model though. So if you've got 3 or 4 passions and they all bring you great joy, I would pursue them all. Particularly if it's something like athletics. because our bodies do deteriorate. You know, and if your whole passion, okay, you take a gymnast who, what is it, by 20, a female gymnast is done. If your entire passion of your life is something like that, so your life's over at 20, that's not much of a life. So I think having multiple passions that we can carry on, and maybe even some at different stages in our lives, you know, what's going to be your passion when you're in your 80s? Hopefully you'll live that long. What's it going to be? And it probably is not going to be the same passion that's in your 20s. But when you see people in their 80s that just have incredible vigor and are just alive, that's what I want to be. And so I think having multiple that we nurture and even think about over our life is absolutely appropriate. You could have more than one core passion.